Elias stumbled after Myra, boots crunching over brittle glass that had once been sand. The storm was building, wind tearing at the ground like it wanted to rip the bones out of the earth. Every flash of lightning painted the world white for a heartbeat, showing him ghosts of what it used to be. Highway signs, shattered cars, half-buried toys. Memories of the ordinary. "Keep your head down," Myra called over the wind. Her voice carried the steadiness of someone who had lived too long in chaos to fear it anymore. They slipped between the ruins of a skyscraper. Steel ribs clawed at the sky, wrapped in smoke. Myra ducked into a narrow service tunnel, gesturing him inside. "Move." The air changed as soon as they entered, colder, damp with mold and the iron tang of old water. Elias followed the faint beam of her flashlight, his hand brushing cracked tiles. "How long have you been down here?" he asked. "Long enough to know when the storms start eating the sky," she said. "Long enough to stop counting years." She paused, her beam catching the chrono band on his wrist. "That's tech I've never seen. Military." He hesitated. "You could say that." She gave him a quick, skeptical glance but didn't press. Trust was currency. No one spent it easily. After what felt like an hour of crawling through tunnels, the passage opened into a cavernous chamber. Rows of dim lights hung from broken pipes. Makeshift walls of sheet metal and plastic divided the space into living quarters. People moved among them, thin, hollow-eyed but alive. Children laughed somewhere in the dark, a sound so small and fragile it made Elias' chest ache. Myra turned to him. "Welcome to Haven." The settlement was built inside an old subway junction. 4 tunnels branched outward like veins, each one converted into something vital: storage, sleeping quarters, hydro pumps, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of burnt beans. Elias followed Myra through the central platform where a fire burned in an oil drum. The survivors gathered around it, wary eyes tracking the stranger. A tall man with a scar running across his cheek stepped forward, rifle slung low. "New face," he said. "Found him topside." Myra nodded. "Scavs almost had him. He's lucky." "Lucky," the man repeated, his tone sharp. "Or dangerous." Elias met his gaze. "If I meant harm, you wouldn't be breathing to ask." Myra shot him a look that said, "Don't." "Caleb, he's with me. He'll pull his weight." Caleb studied him for a long moment before turning away. "Then let's hope your luck lasts longer than the last guy's." As they walked deeper, Elias noticed murals on the tunnel walls, faded images of blue skies and forests, painted by rough hands. Hope captured in color, refusing to die. Myra led him into a smaller chamber lit by candles. "You can rest here. Don't wander after lights out. People get jumpy." Elias sat on the cot she pointed to. His body screamed for sleep, but his mind wouldn't stop. The chrono reactor, the small capsule strapped beneath his jacket, pulsed faintly against his ribs. If anyone found out what it was, they'd kill him for it. "Why did you save me?" he asked suddenly. Myra paused in the doorway. "Because once someone saved me, and I didn't deserve it either." Then she left him with the darkness and the hum of the underground city. He dreamed of the world before, sunlight spilling across glass towers, his wife's laughter echoing in their kitchen, the first test of the time reactor. Then fire. Always fire. He woke gasping. Sweat clung to his skin despite the chill. Around him the settlement stirred, the soft murmur of morning, boots scraping on metal. A small child peeked into his room, eyes wide. "Are you from the sky?" she whispered. He blinked, unsure how to answer. "Something like that." She smiled, a quick flash of innocence in a place that had forgotten what it looked like. "Mama says the sky used to be blue. Is that true?" He nodded. "Bluer than you can imagine." Her eyes widened like she could see it just from his words. Then she darted away, leaving him alone with a strange ache in his heart. Elias stepped outside, following the smell of food. Myra stood by the fire, handing out bowls of soup to the others. "Sleep?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not much. You'll get used to it. Down here, dreams don't rest easy." She handed him a bowl. The soup was thin, but it was warm. As he ate, he watched the people laughing softly, repairing old radios, teaching a boy to mend fabric. It was fragile, imperfect, but alive. It was everything the future had lost. He thought of why he'd come. Change one event, stop the collapse, rewrite the end. Yet standing here among the broken, he realized something terrifying. Maybe history wasn't only written by machines and politics. Maybe it was written by hearts that refused to give up. And if he changed too much, maybe these people, Myra, the child, this tiny spark of life, would vanish like smoke. He looked at Myra. She caught his gaze, and for a heartbeat the world seemed less ruined. Then Caleb's voice cut through the warmth. "Storm scouts spotted movement near the north tunnel," he said grimly. "Banner patrols, they're back." The air in Haven shifted, fear, heavy and sharp. Myra set down her bowl. "Everyone to positions, if the banner finds us." "They won't," Caleb growled, checking his rifle. "Not if we move first." Elias' pulse quickened. The Black Banner. He remembered that name from the files, the spark that ignited the final collapse. He'd found them. And now he knew exactly where the change had to begin. The tunnels were alive with tension. Every sound, boots scuffing on stone, the click of rifle bolts, the distant drip of leaking water, echoed like a heartbeat through the underground refuge. Elias could feel it in the air, the pulse of fear wrapped in the rhythm of survival. The Black Banner was close. He followed Myra and Caleb through a narrow corridor lined with flickering lanterns. A handful of scouts waited near the northern gate, their faces drawn and pale beneath layers of dust. Their weapons were mismatched, rifles built from broken machine parts, knives made from scrap metal. But their eyes burned with something Elias recognized, the desperate courage of those with nothing left to lose. Myra slung a small pack over her shoulder. "We'll scout the ridge and mark their approach," she said. "If the banners set up a base, we need to move Haven before they find us." Caleb frowned. "You sure you want to take him?" He jerked his chin toward Elias. "We don't even know what he is." Myra met his gaze evenly. "He's breathing and he can shoot. That's enough for me." Elias said nothing. Trust came hard in the end of the world, and he didn't blame them for their suspicion. He'd seen humanity devour itself before. They climbed a rusted ladder that led to the surface. The hatch groaned as it opened, and cold air flooded in, thick with the scent of ash. Outside, dawn was a dull smear of red behind the clouds. The world stretched in ruin, skyscraper bones piercing the fog, cars half buried in black sand, trees that had turned to stone from decades of toxic storms. The silence was immense, broken only by the hiss of wind across broken glass. Elias adjusted the strap of his reactor case beneath his jacket. Every time he touched it, he felt the hum, a faint vibration, alive and waiting. It was a reminder of why he was here and what he couldn't afford to lose. They moved quickly, keeping low among the wreckage. Myra led the way, eyes sharp, steps silent. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had lived 100 lives on the edge of death. "Back before the fall," she murmured, "this was a hospital. My mother used to work here. I was 10 when it burned." Elias glanced at her. "You remember it?" "Every sound," she said. "Every scream. Some memories don't die, they just wait." He nodded slowly. "I know that feeling." They reached the ridge at sunrise. The light struggled through the haze, painting the world in shades of copper and smoke. In the valley below, movement glinted, vehicles, black and armored, crawling through the ruins like insects. The Black Banner. Myra lifted her scope. 5 transports, maybe 40 soldiers, too many. "Too many for what?" Caleb muttered. "For us to fight and live," she said. Elias studied the scene, mind racing. The banner was gathering tech, old reactors, weapons, anything that still worked. They weren't scavengers. They were builders, builders of destruction. He knew this pattern. He'd seen it in the archives of his time. This was the moment history had written in blood, the beginning of the Reclamation War, the event that would shatter every fragile alliance left on Earth and lead to the final collapse. And now he was standing inside it. Myra lowered her scope. "We head back," warned the others. Before they could move, a sharp sound cut through the wind, a crack of metal on metal. A scout had stepped on a fragment of glass. The soldiers below froze. Then in a heartbeat, chaos erupted. Gunfire tore through the air, shattering the silence. Myra shouted, "Run!" and the group scattered into the wreckage. Bullets bit into stone and steel, sparks exploding around them. Elias grabbed Myra's arm, pulling her behind a fallen beam. The air smelled of smoke and ozone. Caleb fired back, shouting curses into the haze. "Back to the tunnels," Myra yelled. Elias reached for his weapon, but a sudden flash caught his eye, a soldier on the ridge above, leveling his rifle straight at her. Without thinking, Elias shoved her aside and fired. The soldier fell, tumbling down the rocks. Myra looked at him, eyes wide. "You." "Go," he shouted. They sprinted across the ruins, lungs burning. Behind them, explosions thundered. The sky seemed to tear open with light as plasma fire cut through the mist. Elias' reactor pulsed faster, reacting to the energy around it. He could feel the paradox building, the fragile balance of time beginning to strain. Every death here, every bullet, every spark, it all mattered. History was bending, and he was the weight that bent it. They dove into the tunnel entrance just as the storm hit. Lightning slashed across the sky, white and blinding. The ground shook. Inside, the gate slammed shut. The survivors pulled the heavy metal bar across it, sealing them in. For a long moment, no one spoke. The sound of the storm outside was deafening, like the world itself was screaming. Then Myra turned to Elias, her voice low and trembling with a mix of anger and awe. "You saved my life." He shook his head. "You saved mine first." Her eyes softened just a fraction. "Then maybe we're even." Caleb stepped forward. "Even or not, we can't stay here. They saw us. They'll come for Haven." Elias met Myra's gaze. He knew what came next in this timeline. The banner would find the settlement, burn it, and enslave the survivors to build the reactors that would later destroy the last of Earth's atmosphere. Unless he changed it. Unless he broke time again. He drew a slow breath. "Then we move," he said quietly. "But not just to run. I can help you fight." Caleb snorted. "With what? That toy on your wrist?" Elias looked down at the chronoband. The faint blue light pulsed in response, steady and alive. He raised his eyes. "With this, and with what I know." Myra studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then tell us, traveler, what do you know?" He looked at her, this woman of ashes and fire, whose hope had survived the unthinkable, and said, "I know how the world ends, and how we can stop it." Outside, thunder rolled like the roar of fate. And deep in the earth, for the first time in a century, history began to tremble. The storm raged above for 3 days. Thunder rolled across the city like a wounded beast, shaking the tunnels beneath Denver's ruins. Water leaked through the cracks in the ceiling, dripping into rusted buckets and cracked cups. The people of Haven huddled close to the fires, whispering prayers to gods that hadn't answered in decades. Elias stood alone near the north tunnel, watching the blue pulse of his chronoband flicker in rhythm with the lightning above. The light reflected in his eyes, faint, steady, alive. He'd seen storms like this before. They always came before a collapse. Behind him, footsteps approached. Myra's voice cut softly through the hum of rain. "You haven't slept," she said. Elias didn't turn. "You haven't either." She came to stand beside him, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the dripping stone. I've been running since I was 15. You get used to sleepless nights. He glanced at her. You shouldn't have to. Myra gave a small, tired smile. Shouldn't and won't are two different words, traveler. The nickname had stuck since Caleb first muttered it. Elias didn't correct them. He couldn't tell them the truth. Not yet. Not until he was sure history could bear the weight of what he'd already changed. Caleb says the banner's regrouping, she said. They've got drones now. Old-world machines reprogrammed to hunt. We can't stay hidden much longer. I know, Elias said quietly. If they find Haven, everything ends here. Myra frowned. You talk like you've already seen it. He hesitated. Maybe I have. Her gaze sharpened. What are you, Elias? For a moment, only the storm answered. The wind howled through the cracks in the tunnels, a sound like the earth itself remembering pain. Then Elias spoke. Where I come from, there's nothing left, no sky, no soil, just machines and ash. Humanity dies gasping for air it can't breathe. He looked at her. I came back to stop it. Myra stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then she laughed softly, but there was no mockery in it, only exhaustion. You sound insane. Maybe, he said. But insanity's just another word for hope where I come from. She studied him a long time. And you think you can stop the end of the world? I don't know, he admitted, but I can try. For a moment, something fragile passed between them, an understanding carved out of shared exhaustion and unspoken grief. Myra looked away first. Then we'd better start planning, she said, because when the storm clears, the banner will come, and I won't let them take this place. Elias nodded. Neither will I. The next morning, the storm broke. The sky outside was a torn wound of gray and gold. The air smelled of ozone and wet dust. Steam rose from the streets like ghosts fleeing the light. Caleb and a dozen others worked to load supplies into makeshift carts, water tanks, food, medical kits. The mood was tense but determined. Myra gathered the group on the platform. We can't fight the banner head-on, she said. But we can make them bleed for every inch they take. We move at dusk, south, through the rail tunnels. There's an old station near the river, stable ground, fresh wells. We rebuild there. Murmurs spread through the crowd, fear, hope, disbelief. Elias stepped forward. They're tracking you through power signals. The old generators are marked with heat beacons. They'll find this place by nightfall. Caleb narrowed his eyes. And how do you know that? Because I've seen them do it, Elias said simply. They'll come from the West Ridge through the collapsed district. If we set traps along the overpass, we can slow them down, buy enough time to move everyone. Myra turned to him. Can you show us? Elias nodded. I'll need fuel cells, metal scrap, and wire. I can make something that'll stop them for a while. Caleb crossed his arms. You're asking us to trust you with explosives and tech we barely understand. I'm asking you to trust that I want to live, Elias replied. Caleb stared at him, jaw tight, then finally nodded once. You get one chance, traveler, don't waste it. By dusk, Haven moved like a living organism, organized chaos. Children clung to parents, carts rolled, guards watched the tunnels. Elias worked in silence, hands steady as he built the traps, EMP mines, powered by the last charge of his reactor band. They'd disable the banner's drones, even if only briefly. Myra joined him as he finished the last device. You really believe we can survive this? She asked quietly. Elias looked at her. Survival isn't enough. You have to believe in more than that. Her brow furrowed. Like what? Rebirth, he said. The world ended because no one believed it could begin again. Myra stared at him, and for a heartbeat, she looked like she wanted to believe it too. Then Caleb's shout echoed from the tunnel mouth. They're coming. Elias and Myra exchanged a single glance before running toward the gate. The night burned with headlights. Through the cracked street above, armored vehicles rolled like shadows of old gods, massive, relentless. Drones buzzed overhead, their red eyes cutting through the fog. The black banner had found them. Elias pressed his hand to the chrono band. "We hold the line," he said softly. Myra loaded her rifle. "Then let's make history remember us." Lightning flashed, illuminating the ruins. The battle for the last light of humanity was about to begin. And in the depths of the scarred sky, time itself held its breath. The first explosion lit up the night like sunrise. A blast wave tore through the western ridge, hurling drones from the sky in a rain of shattered steel. The echo rolled across the ruins, waking the sleeping city of bones. Haven's defenders moved like shadows, darting between concrete pillars, firing from shattered windows, their breaths sharp and fast in the cold air. Elias crouched behind an overturned rail car, the chrono band on his wrist glowing faint blue. He could feel the pulse of time itself resonating through the metal, each heartbeat a reminder that the past was shifting beneath his feet. The EMP mines had worked. Half the drones were blind, spiraling helplessly into walls. But the banner kept coming. Armored figures emerged from the smoke, black insignias painted across their chests, faces hidden behind mirrored visors. They moved like soldiers who'd forgotten what mercy meant. Myra's voice crackled through the old comms link. "East line's holding, but not for long. We need cover fire." Elias peered over the railcar. On it. He rewired one of the mines into a makeshift charge and hurled it toward an advancing vehicle. The explosion ripped through the street, flipping the truck onto its side. Screams echoed briefly, then vanished under the roar of engines and gunfire. Caleb sprinted past, shouting orders. "Fall back to the south tunnel. Move, move." The refugees surged toward safety. Elias and Myra held the rear guard, covering them with bursts of gunfire. The smell of ozone, metal, and blood mingled into a haze that clung to the air. Myra ducked behind the wall, breathing hard. "They're not retreating. They're not even slowing down." "They won't," Elias said. "They believe they're purging what's left of the old world." "And what do you believe?" He met her gaze. "That the old world wasn't the problem, we were." A sudden blast hurled them both backward. The ceiling groaned above, dust falling like snow. Elias shielded Myra as concrete crashed around them, blocking the path to the tunnels. Caleb's voice echoed faintly over the comms. "The south exit's sealed. We're trapped." Elias coughed through the dust. "There's another way. Follow me." He led Myra through a maintenance shaft that wound upward, narrow and slick with water. Every few meters, she glanced back, the red glow of approaching soldiers drawing closer. "Elias," she shouted, "they're right behind us." He reached a rusted hatch and slammed his palm against the chrono band. The band flickered, sparking violently. "Come on, come on." The door's lock melted away in a flash of light. They burst into the open air, onto the broken rooftop of an old transit station. Below them, the city burned. Myra looked down, eyes wide with despair. "There's too many." Elias stepped to the edge, wind tearing through his coat. "Then we give them a story they'll never forget." He activated the chrono band. For a moment, time bent. Lightning froze mid-strike. Rain hung suspended in the air, glittering like diamonds. Myra's breath caught as she watched Elias walk through the storm, each step leaving trails of light. The band blazed brighter than ever before, and his voice cut through the silence like a prayer. "This isn't where it ends, it's where it begins." He slammed the chronocore into the ground. A shockwave of blue fire erupted, swallowing the entire block. Drones dropped from the sky, their circuits fried. Vehicles halted mid-charge. The banner soldiers were thrown back, their armor sparking with static discharge. When the light faded, silence returned. Haven still stood. Elias collapsed to his knees, the chrono band flickering weakly. Smoke rose from his arm, the skin beneath scorched. Myra rushed to him, grabbing his shoulders. "Elias, talk to me." He managed a faint smile. We bought time. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. You almost killed yourself doing it. Wouldn't be the first time. Myra shook her head, half angry, half in awe. You're insane. He looked at her, exhaustion in his smile. Maybe, but insanity's just hope, remember. For the first time she laughed. Genuine, brief, beautiful, even in the ash. Below them, survivors began to cheer. Haven had survived the night. But Elias felt the weight of the chrono band, now cracked and dim. He knew this victory had come, at a cost the others couldn't see. Because somewhere deep in the threads of time, something had shifted, something he hadn't meant to touch. And in the silence between thunder, a new future began to stir. The morning after the battle, the world felt different, too still, too quiet. Smoke hung in the air like fog. The streets around Haven were littered with the remains of war, shattered drones, burned-out trucks, and the faint, acrid smell of ozone that never quite left your lungs. The sky, bruised with streaks of ash and gold, felt like it was waiting for something or someone. Elias sat on the edge of the old station roof, staring at the broken chrono band wrapped around his wrist. Its blue light flickered weakly, struggling to stay alive. He knew what that meant. Time had changed, again. Footsteps echoed behind him, light, cautious. Myra. You should rest, she said softly. You haven't moved since dawn. I can't, Elias murmured. Every time I close my eyes, I see it. The moment I triggered the chrono core. It shouldn't have reached that far. It shouldn't have altered anything outside the battlefield. But it did. He nodded. Something's different, I can feel it. Myra crouched beside him, her face shadowed but calm. Different how? Elias turned to her, eyes haunted. There's a fracture in the timeline. Someone who wasn't supposed to be here is. Later that day, the survivors gathered in the main hall. The wounded lay on makeshift beds. Caleb and the others handed out rations. Spirits were high, but under the surface, fear lingered like a ghost. They won, but at what cost? Caleb slammed a crate shut and joined Elias and Myra near the old generator. Scouts say the banner's fallen back to the ridge, probably regrouping. Elias frowned. No, they wouldn't retreat unless. Unless what? Myra asked. Unless they were told to. Caleb raised an eyebrow. By who? Before Elias could answer, a sharp voice rang out from the tunnel entrance. By me. Everyone turned. A man stepped out of the shadows, tall, clean, unscarred by the wasteland. He wore a coat too new, too untouched for this world. His eyes gleamed with intelligence and familiarity. Elias froze, his breath hitched. No, it can't be. The man smiled faintly. Hello, Elias, it's been a long time. Myra glanced between them. You two know each other. Elias' voice was a whisper. He shouldn't exist. I erased you. The man, Lucian Ward, tilted his head. You tried, but time doesn't forget, Elias, it just rearranges. He stepped closer, and the chrono band on Elias' wrist sparked violently, reacting to the distortion his presence caused. Myra moved between them, rifle raised. Who the hell are you? Lucian smiled. The other traveler. Elias' mind raced. In his original timeline, Lucian had been his partner, his friend. Together, they'd built the chrono reactor, designed to reset one catastrophic moment in human history. But when the world began to collapse, Lucian changed the plan. He wanted to control time, not restore it. Elias had stopped him. At least he thought he had. What do you want? Elias asked quietly. The same thing you do, Lucian said, circling him like a predator. To rebuild, to reshape. But unlike you, I'm not trying to save the old world. His eyes flicked to Myra. I'm building a new one. Myra's voice was steady. By slaughtering the survivors. By purging the disease that destroyed everything in the first place, Lucian replied coldly. Humanity's greed, its weakness, its sentiment. You call it hope. I call it decay. Elias' fists clenched. You join the banner. I lead them, Lucian corrected. They listen, they follow, they believe. The hall went silent. Caleb's hand tightened on his weapon. You're the one who's been hunting us. Lucian didn't even glance at him. His eyes stayed on Elias. You used the chrono core, didn't you? You think you won this battle, but you only made things worse. Every time you use that device, you bend the timeline further. Cause and effect don't follow rules anymore, they follow you. Elias felt the truth settle like ice in his stomach. He'd seen the signs, small details that didn't match his memories. A child who shouldn't exist, a ruin that hadn't been there before. The timeline was unraveling. Lucian extended a hand. Come with me, help me rebuild it the right way. You can't fix this with sentiment and mercy, you know that. Elias looked at him for a long, terrible moment. Then he said, if this is the new world you want, I'd rather burn with the old one. Lucian sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. The sound of engines rumbled in the distance. Myra's eyes widened. He brought them here. Lucian's smile was thin. I never fight battles twice. He turned and walked back into the shadows, his coat flaring in the wind. The moment he was gone, the chronoband on Elias' wrist flared white-hot, pulsing in warning. The threads of time themselves quivered, as if reality were holding its breath. Caleb's voice trembled with fury. You knew him, you brought this here. Elias turned sharply. No, I tried to erase him. Well, you failed, Caleb shouted, and now he's coming for all of us. Myra stepped between them. Enough, we deal with the fight in front of us. Her voice carried command, stronger than before, unshaken. We move, now. If Lucian's back, he's not just bringing soldiers, he's bringing the end. Elias nodded slowly, his eyes distant, haunted. He looked down at the chronoband. The crack in its surface had spread. And in that thin fracture he could see something flickering. Another moment, another world bleeding through time. A warning. A future where Lucian wins. The wind carried whispers. They weren't human, too soft, too ancient, like echoes of moments that had never happened. Elias stood at the edge of Haven's wall, staring into the wasteland beyond. The horizon shimmered faintly, like heat distortion, except this was cold, unnaturally so. His chronoband pulsed dimly, and each pulse sent a chill through his bones. Myra joined him, her steps light but cautious. You haven't slept again. He didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. Do you see it? See what? The tier, he murmured. Right there, just past the ruins of the broadcast tower. She squinted, frowning. There's nothing there, Elias. He exhaled, a sound between a sigh and disbelief. That's the problem, there should be. Myra rested her hands on the cold metal railing. You're scaring me a little. He looked at her finally, tired, haunted, but still grounded. Myra, I think I broke something in time. When I used the chrono core during the battle, I didn't just fry the banner's systems. I tore through history itself. Before she could respond, a faint ripple rolled through the air. The clouds stuttered, freezing for half a heartbeat before resuming their drift. The horizon blinked. And for that single instant, the ruins of Haven shimmered, then changed. The broken towers stood whole again. The blackened earth turned green, the air clearer, vibrant. Then, just as suddenly, it snapped back to decay. Myra's eyes widened. I saw that. What the hell was that? Elias' voice trembled. A memory of the future or the past, or both. Inside the safe house, maps and notes littered the table. Caleb leaned over, his jaw tight as Elias explained. You're saying the world is flickering? Caleb asked. That's insane. It's worse than insane, Elias replied. It means reality's losing track of which timeline it belongs to. Myra folded her arms. Lucian said something like that, about bending cause and effect. Caleb scoffed. So now we've got one lunatic trying to rebuild the world by force, and another one tearing time apart by accident. Great. Elias ignored the jab. There's still a way to stabilize the fracture. The chronocore wasn't meant for destruction. It was meant to anchor time. I can repair it. Caleb eyed him warily. And what happens if you're wrong? Then the world unravels completely, Elias said simply. Silence fell. Myra spoke first, her voice steady but heavy. What do you need? Elias met her eyes. The reactor, the original one, the chrono reactor we built in New Manhattan. It's the only source powerful enough to realign time's flow. Caleb frowned. That's in the dead zone, radiation, collapsed sectors, you'd never make it. I don't have a choice, Elias said quietly. Lucian's out there, and every moment he exists, the fracture widens. Myra stepped forward. Then I'm going with you. He looked at her, guilt flickering behind his calm. It's not your fight. She shook her head. Hope doesn't survive by standing still. You taught me that. 2 nights later, the journey began. They left Haven under a bruised sky, following the remains of the old interstate. The road wound through fields of twisted steel and glass, where skeletal billboards still whispered slogans from a world that had forgotten itself. Myra walked beside Elias, her hand resting on the strap of her rifle. You ever think about what it was like before all this? Elias gave a faint smile. Every day, but the memories change. I remember a different face in the same photograph, a city where a desert used to be. The timelines are bleeding together. Doesn't that drive you mad? He looked at her, his eyes distant. Maybe madness is just what's left when you've seen too many versions of the same mistake. A low hum rolled across the valley, the sound of engines. They ducked behind a broken sign as a convoy of banner trucks passed on the road below, carrying crates marked with the black sigil of the serpent. Lucian's mark. Myra's hand tightened around her weapon. They're moving supplies. He's planning something big. Elias' jaw tightened. The reactor, he's going there too. How do you know? He looked down at his chronoband. Its faint light pulsed in sync with the convoy's movement. Because I can feel it. Our timelines are linked. Every step he takes leaves an echo. Myra swallowed hard. Then we have to reach it first. Elias nodded. We will. As they moved through the ruins, the flickering grew worse. Sometimes Myra would turn her head and find Elias standing in 2 places at once, one version older, scarred, staring back at her with hollow eyes before vanishing. At night she woke to whispers, words that sounded like Elias' voice but softer, sadder. Don't let him win, don't become me. She never told Elias, but the fear rooted deep inside her. Because if time was breaking, who's to say which Elias was the real one anymore? By dawn, the two stood on a ridge overlooking what had once been the heart of civilization, New Manhattan. It wasn't a city anymore, it was a crater. At its center lay the ruins of the chrono reactor, still glowing faintly blue against the endless gray. Myra exhaled, awe and dread mixing in her voice. That's it. Elias nodded slowly. That's the beginning and the end. He looked at the fractured skyline, echoes of the past shimmering faintly above the ruins like ghosts. Time was tearing itself apart. And somewhere in that chaos, Lucian waited. The road into New Manhattan was paved with ghosts. As Elias and Myra descended into the crater, the air grew heavier, dense with radiation and memory. The world here didn't breathe, it remembered. Every step seemed to stir echoes of the city that once was, voices caught between existence and oblivion. They passed twisted steel spires, cracked glass towers half swallowed by dust. The skyline shimmered faintly, sometimes whole for the span of a heartbeat before fracturing back into ruin. Myra stopped at a toppled streetlight, running her fingers over the faded paint of a child's mural. They tried to make this place beautiful, she whispered, even at the end. Elias glanced at her, his face drawn but gentle. We always try. That's what makes us dangerous. She gave him a sideways look. Hope's dangerous. He met her eyes. Always has been. By midday, the ground trembled beneath their feet, the faint pulse of the chrono reactor still alive somewhere below. Elias' chrono band glowed in answer, drawing them forward through the ruins. They entered the old subway tunnels, where rusted trains lay frozen on the tracks. Every now and then, faint laughter echoed through the corridors, voices from another time bleeding through the fracture. Myra slowed, scanning the shadows. Elias, do you hear that? He nodded slowly. It's not real. They're imprints, temporal echoes left by the reactor. Feels real enough, she muttered. They reached a sealed bulkhead deep underground, the air humming with static. Elias pressed his hand to the door. His chronoband flared, projecting faint lines of light that traced old security circuits. Still responds to you, Myra said quietly. It remembers its creator, Elias replied. With a soft hiss, the door unlocked and slid open. A gust of cold, sterile air swept over them. The chamber beyond was vast, an underground cathedral of machines. The chrono reactor still stood at its center, a monumental sphere of glass and metal suspended by broken support arms. Its light was faint now, flickering like a dying heartbeat. Myra stepped forward slowly, her eyes wide. You built this. Elias nodded, his voice distant. Lucian and I, it was supposed to save the world. He moved closer, hand brushing the surface of the core. The hum beneath it vibrated with a strange, rhythmic pulse, like breathing. Myra frowned. That sound, what is it? Elias hesitated. It's syncing with something. Before he could finish, the chamber lights flared. And the shadows moved. Figures stepped out from behind the machinery, banner soldiers, their armor reflecting the reactor's glow. Behind them, calm and composed, walked Lucian. His coat was immaculate, his expression coldly triumphant. You made good time, he said. I was starting to think the great Elias Kane had finally run out of tomorrows. Myra raised her weapon, step away from the core. Lucian ignored her. You still don't understand, do you, Elias? You keep trying to fix time as if it's broken, but it is. It's evolving. Elias took a step forward. Into what? A world ruled by you. Lucian smiled faintly. By order, by design, chaos gave us extinction. It's time someone rewrote the rules. He turned toward the reactor, tracing a finger along its glass surface. This machine can do more than you ever realized. It doesn't just anchor time, it creates it. Every fracture, every echo, every paradox, all roads lead back here. Myra's eyes darted to Elias. What's he talking about? Elias' voice was quiet, almost broken. He's going to collapse the timelines. Lucian nodded approvingly. All the threads, past, present, future, woven into one perfect moment. No more war, no more loss, just order. And what happens to the rest of us? Myra demanded. Lucian met her gaze. You cease to exist, but think of it as mercy. The hum of the reactor deepened, the floor trembling. Elias could feel the chronoband vibrating violently now, the device resonating with the core's power. You'll destroy everything, Elias said, his voice low. You'll kill everyone. Lucian's eyes softened with something almost like pity. Everyone's already dead, Elias. They just don't know it yet. He raised his hand. The banner soldiers took aim. Myra fired first. The shot ricocheted off armor, sparks scattering across the chamber. Chaos erupted, gunfire echoing through the vast space, light flashing against steel. Elias dove for cover, pulling Myra behind a console. We can't fight them head-on, she shouted. I'm not planning to. Elias ripped a power cable free, sparks flying. We take the reactor offline. He connected the cable to his chronoband. The device flared, energy coursing through his veins like fire. Time itself seemed to stutter, rounds hanging in midair for half a second before snapping back into motion. Myra stared. Elias, what are you doing? Buying us seconds, he gritted out. Make them count. She dashed toward the control terminal, dodging bursts of fire. Lucian turned, fury breaking through his calm. You can't stop it. The cycle's already begun. Elias forced himself to his feet, fighting the pull of time tearing at his mind. Then I'll end the cycle. He pressed his hand to the reactor's core. The chrono band screamed in protest, sparks flying as reality itself began to twist. Myra felt the world lurch, sound stretching, color fading, gravity bending. Lucian shouted something she couldn't hear. Then there was light, endless blinding light. And silence. When the glow faded, the chamber was empty. No soldiers, no Lucian, no sound. Myra staggered forward, her head ringing. Elias. Her voice echoed softly. Then from within the fractured shell of the reactor came a faint flicker of blue light. She stepped closer, heart pounding. Inside the glass, half buried in the light, Elias floated, suspended between seconds, eyes closed, face calm. The chrono band on his wrist pulsed faintly, in perfect rhythm with the reactor's core. Myra's breath caught. Elias, what did you do? Outside, thunder rolled across the dead city. And above the ruins of New Manhattan, the sky began to crack. The floor shuddered as the chrono reactor roared back to life. Beams of fractured light carved through the chamber, refracting into streams of blue and gold that twisted like veins through the air. Elias staggered, clutching the console for balance. The chrono band burned against his wrist, reacting violently to the reactor's surge. Lucian, stop. You'll tear reality apart. Lucian didn't flinch. He stood at the reactor's heart, his silhouette framed in its shimmering aura. Reality was torn long ago. I'm just making it whole again. Myra aimed her rifle, her voice trembling with fury. Whole, you're murdering billions. Lucian turned to her, expression calm. Collateral to eternity. The hum grew to a roar. The air shimmered, warping into mirages, flashes of other times. They saw themselves reflected in 1,000 worlds. A new Manhattan still gleaming with life. Elias laughing beside Lucian, years before the fall. A burning sky raining ash as humanity's last city crumbled. Myra lowered her weapon for a second, eyes wide. What is this? Every timeline, Elias whispered. Every version of what we were bleeding together. Lucian extended his hand toward Elias. Join me. You built this with me. You knew the cost of hope. Let's end the pain. Elias stared at him, the friend who had once shared his dreams, now swallowed by obsession. Hope isn't the enemy, Lucian. It's the proof we still deserve to live. Lucian's eyes softened for a heartbeat, the faintest shadow of doubt flickering in them. But it vanished as quickly as it came. So be it, he said, and pressed his palm against the core. The reactor screamed. Light exploded outward, collapsing space into itself. The walls folded like paper, time convulsing in on every direction. Myra cried out as her body fractured into afterimages. One moment here, the next a blur of ghosted versions flickering through alternate pasts. Elias dove for the console, fingers flying across the interface. I can overload it, reverse the surge. Will that stop him? She shouted, her voice splintering through static. No, he said grimly, but it might give us another chance. He slammed his chrono band into the console, merging its energy with the reactor's stream. Sparks tore through the air as feedback rippled down the chamber. Lucian staggered, realization dawning too late. Elias, what have you done? Something you taught me, Elias said, his voice breaking. That time can always be rewritten. The blast hit like the birth of a star. Myra's scream was swallowed in the light. Lucian's form shattered into a dozen timelines at once. And Elias, his body dissolving into golden particles, felt only peace. As the chamber imploded, He saw fragments of 1,000 worlds flicker before him. A world without the plague, one where Myra grew old beneath sunlight, one where he and Lucian never built the reactor at all. Then silence. When the light faded, the world was still. Elias woke in a field of ash and starlight beneath a sky untouched by ruin. The air was warm, alive. He looked at his chronoband. It was cracked, its light fading. Time around him was stable, quiet, healed. Myra was beside him, unconscious but breathing. He exhaled shakily, a tear slipping down his cheek. The horizon burned gold as dawn broke. He looked to the sun and whispered, "We made it." But deep in the silence of the reborn world, the faintest echo of Lucian's voice lingered. Every end is just the start of another loop. And somewhere, buried beneath the earth of the new age, a heartbeat pulsed faintly within the ruins of the chrono reactor. The cycle had not ended, it had only begun anew. Elias opened his eyes to the scent of rain. The air was clean, fresh in a way he hadn't felt in years. He blinked against the soft glow of morning, the ash fields now covered in green. Tiny blades of grass pushed through cracked earth, glistening with dew. Above, clouds drifted lazily across a blue sky that seemed almost impossible. For a long time, he simply breathed. Then he heard a faint groan beside him. "Myra!" Her eyes fluttered open and she coughed softly, sitting up. When her gaze met his, it was full of disbelief. "Are we alive?" He laughed shakily. "Looks that way." They sat in silence, staring at the reborn world around them, the ruins now half swallowed by wildflowers and ivy. Birds sang somewhere in the distance, their calls like echoes of a time long forgotten. "It worked," she whispered. "You did it." "No," Elias said, his voice low. "We did." Days passed as they explored what remained. The cities were gone, but in their place were forests growing through glass and steel. Streams ran where highways once stood. The air was thick with rebirth. Yet something else stirred, a quiet hum beneath the soil, like a heartbeat. The chrono reactor's echo, faint but still there. Elias felt it when he slept. Dreams of Lucian, standing beneath a tree of light, whispering, "There is always another loop." He'd wake to Myra's steady breathing beside him and the warmth of a campfire. Each time he'd remind himself, this was real, this was peace. One evening, they reached the edge of the ocean. The waves crashed against cliffs of obsidian, endless and alive. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Myra stood at the water's edge, her reflection rippling in the surf. "Do you think anyone else made it?" she asked softly. Elias looked out to sea. If time healed itself, maybe they never needed to. She smiled faintly. "Then we start over." He turned to her, studying the light in her eyes, the same light that had guided him through every nightmare, every betrayal. "You still believe in rebuilding?" "I believe in living," she said. "That's what you fought for, isn't it?" He chuckled. "Maybe, or maybe I was just too stubborn to die." They both laughed, and for the first time in years it sounded human. As night fell, Elias wandered down the shore alone. The chronoband still flickered weakly on his wrist, its glow fading with each heartbeat. He held it up to the stars and whispered, "You can rest now." He thought of Lucian, his brilliance, his madness, his longing to control what could never be owned. "I hope you found peace, old friend," he murmured. A faint breeze swept across the ocean, and for a heartbeat, he swore he heard Lucian's voice carried on the wind. "You finally did it, Elias. You changed everything." He smiled, eyes glistening. "No, Lucian, we did." Weeks became months. The world healed faster than anyone could have imagined. Trees split the shells of skyscrapers. Rivers cleansed the cities. Nature reclaimed what time had scarred. Elias and Myra built a small home overlooking the sea. They planted seeds, raised fires, and named the stars that had no names. Survivors found them eventually, lost souls drawn by whispers of a man who had turned back the end. They built together, not out of desperation but out of hope. And every dawn, when the sun broke over the horizon, Elias would stand on the cliffs and watch. The light was never the same twice, as if time itself had learned to dream again. Years later, when his hair had gone silver and Myra's laughter had softened into memory, Elias stood in that same field where he had awakened after the collapse. The chronoband, cracked and dark, rested in his palm. He buried it beneath a young oak tree and smiled. A new generation played nearby, their laughter bright against the wind. The apocalypse was a story now, one told by fireside, half-remembered, almost myth. The world had not just survived. It had begun again. As Elias turned toward the horizon, a shimmer of light flickered for just an instant, the brief, impossible outline of another him, watching from a different time. He smiled. "Rest easy," he whispered, "we made it." And somewhere far beyond the reach of years, the chrono reactor pulsed once more, not in violence but in harmony.